In this video, I am going to transform the way that you think about your strengths when you're playing Warhammer 40,000. Now, this might be a generalist video where I'm going to be giving you an overview of every Imperium faction and how their strengths work, but I'm going to give you a framework that I want you to take, and I want you to like really grasp it and understand it so that you can use it to build all of your armies. And trust me, after this, you're going to start approaching the game in a very different way. So let's get right on into the video. Today, I'm talking about the strengths and weaknesses of every single Imperium army. Now, I don't know if you guys watched, but if you were in attendance earlier this week, I did a live stream where I walked through how Blood Angels has a matchup into every single army in the entire game. One thing that I was really coming across as I was preparing for the live stream was I realized something that was just fundamentally true. As a Blood Angels player, and I also am very well known for Orcs, Custodes, I've done several other armies, but as a current Blood Angels player, what I notice is that my strengths are actually the exact same strengths regardless of what army I'm playing into. And I know, mind blown, that might not seem that profound, but trust me, when we sit in this, it's going to be very, very profound. So if I have a strength, let's say one of my strengths as a Blood Angels player is I've got like 3 different fights first units. I've got the Sanguiner who can come interrupt. I've got Mephiston who can heroic and fight first. I've got a bunch of Blade Guard veterans that are led by a chaplain who has enhancement for fights first. So I've got fights first everywhere. A strength of this army is that it is very challenging to charge me. Because if you charge me, I have the ability to fight first and kill you. And that's a little bit different than some other armies who might only have 1 fight first unit or whatever. And the Sanguiner coming in can screw up your pylons. So that it makes it very, very challenging for people to actually engage with me in charging. That's just one example of a strength of the Blood Angels army. Now, that strength is a strength into every army in the game. Doesn't matter what army I'm playing, it's still a strength. Now, perhaps some of the other armies don't care about my strengths, but it's still my strength as an army. So, for example, if I'm playing against Tau are never really planning on charging me anyway. So perhaps they don't care about my strength, but that doesn't mean it's not my strength it's not one of my strengths as an army. Another strength would be the fact that Blood Angels move faster, so they typically are the ones who initiate. Now, Imperial Knights might not particularly care about that strength because they're like, cool, charge me. You're not going to kill me. You're not going to one-tap me, which means I get to interrupt and kill you. So maybe they don't care about my strength, but that doesn't mean it's not a strength. I use the exact same strengths into Emperor's Children, Chaos Space Beats, whatever. So when you're building your army, I want you to understand that your army has very, very specific strengths. And the reason why you're playing your army is because of the innate strengths that your army has. Now, those strengths come across in 3 different sections. You have unique army rules. You have unique detachments. And you have unique units in your army. So there is a reason to run a Dark Angels army over a Blood Angels army based off of the units, detachments that are available to you, because they would even share the same army rule. But for example, if I wanted to run Thousand Sons or Tau, let's say I want to run the Thousand Sons, and I want to run an army that has very aggressive movement, utilizing my Rhinos, disembarking Rubric Marines who can then like shoot and then overwatch. Well, in Tau, I can actually do something relatively similar. When I have these Devilfishes that can move up, Breachers can get out, they can have, 30 shots at Strength 6, AP2, full rerolls to hit, full rerolls to wound, and I can ignore cover on them. That's basically the exact same style of assault that I might have coming out of a T-Sons army. The difference being is that the T-Sons, they have a army rule, which would allow them to cast a spell that would allow them to move during the shooting phase. So I could move the Rhino up, disembark, and then move through a wall in the shooting phase. So then I can do that action so that my opponent can never overwatch me. So that would be a reason to run that style of army in T-Sons versus running it in the Tau. So this is a really important thing that you got to grasp, is that your strengths will dictate why you play your army and how your army is played. So now let's get into the meat and potatoes of the video, where I'm talking about all of the individual strengths and weaknesses. One thing first is that Imperium armies have a common strength, which is they've got amazing allies that they can access. The most common ally that you'll see allied in would be something like the Calidus Assassin, who is just an absolutely incredible model, which can absolutely transform game plans with her Lord of Deceit aura or the Vect aura, and her ability to uppy downy and just basically do all of your secondaries just by herself. Then you've got things like, hey, Canis Rex could be allied in. And turns out that model's pretty freaking good, and he needs to go up by a lot of points. Anyway, let's jump into Sisters of Battle. All right, so strengths and weaknesses of the Sisters of Battle. Now, when you're playing Sister of Battle, typically the detachments you will see are going to be the Bringers of Flame, Champions of Faith, and Hallowed Martyrs. Now, I'm not saying no other detachments exist, they are, but those are just the ones that you're typically going to see. Let's talk about the strengths of Sisters of Battle as an army. They can guarantee damage and saves. What does this mean? Well, it means that when my Melta gun gets through, I can put a 6 down because their army roll, which is their miracle dice, allows them to skip the rolling step, and they can just substitute a dice roll whenever they need it. And there are some limitations on it, but there's not many. So if I need exactly 8 damage to go through to blow up the tank, and I get 1 Melta through, I can guarantee that it will be 8 damage, assuming you're in Melta range, of course, which is a very, very powerful ability. I can guarantee a save. So all of their vehicles, I think actually everything in the army has a 6-up invulnerable save, but definitely all of their vehicles do. So if I am shooting their Castigator with a Lancer's Laser Destroyer, and it's the last thing that can shoot, and 2 wounds go through, my Castigator's at full health, and the Laser Destroyer will deal d6 plus 3 damage. I can guarantee that I save one of those Laser Destroyers, which means, because I just put a 6 down for their invulnerable save, which means that that Lancer can never kill the Castigator, which kind of disincentivizes the Space Marine player from ever even shooting the Castigator. So you can guarantee saves, which is a very, very big deal. This gets a lot stronger when you go into some of the units that have 4 invulnerable saves. All right, so the fact that they can eliminate the randomness from armies is from the gameplay is very, very powerful. Then they have great anti-elite shooting platform, which is the Castigator. They've got an amazing unit in that. They have really good indirect, one of the best indirects in the game, in the form of the Exorcist. Now, the Exorcist is actually it's got like an AP3 indirect, which means that it's still taking like 2-up save models to their 4-up invulnerable, even with cover. So it's very, very important. The problem with running like these big Exorcist bricks, which people are very terrified of, is the Sisters player is kind of at the mercy of rolling the 4-ups to hit. And if they have a turn of whiffing, they can just kind of lose the game, which is why we don't see triple Exorcist lists all that often, because they are actually a little too much at the mercy of randomization, even in an army that specializes at eliminating randomization. Yeah. So Exorcist, though, they are still a good indirect shooting platform. They've got excellent chaff clearing in the form of Arcoflagellants, and then they've got Morven Vol. So if you know what Morven Vol does, this girl, or this freaking paragon of humanity, has the strongest leader buff in the entire game. When she leads a unit, she gives the unit full rerolls to hit and full rerolls to wound. This is abusive on the Paragon Warsuits, which she typically leads. Now, there are also some other individual like detachment strengths that they have. So, for example, they've got a rule that if there's an infantry unit, they can force your models to hit their infantry unit. So if you charge, I don't know, like a tank, but you're also engaged with a 2-man Crusader squad. I don't even know if Crusaders exist anymore after the Codex release. Doesn't matter. Let's call it Sisters of Battle. They can spend a CP and force you to put your attacks into the Sisters of Battle instead of the tank. So if like Angron charges and wants to kill the tank, well, actually Angron has to kill these Sisters of Battle instead, which can be very, very powerful. So there are some really, really good sneaky shenanigans that Sisters of Battle have. Now, what are the weaknesses of the Sisters of Battle? One huge weakness is low freaking toughness. And this is, generally speaking, going to be the weakness. And it is a very, very, very big weakness because this army is extremely susceptible to just losing far too many models. You can have a unit of intercessors from Space Marines drop down and wipe an entire combat unit for the Sisters of Battle. You can have one grenade thrown out, which just decimates an entire squad of their big anti-tank units. It's a problem for Sisters of Battle that they have to deal with, is that they are very, very susceptible to losing freaking models. Overwatches and other board control mechanisms are also extremely effective into the Sisters of Battle, and generally speaking, their melee is pretty dang bad. They actually, I should write that in here. Poor melee. Arcoflagellants are amazing into things that are like infantry, but are non 2-up save infantry. But outside of that, but if they go into 2-up arm save infantry or even into vehicles, they really start to struggle. And outside of that, you really just have Repentia, which are too expensive. So Repentia would have to come down in cost for them to have another viable melee unit outside of the Morven Vol unit, which will kill anything. So these are the weaknesses you really want to exploit: their low toughness, and you want to exploit their poor melee. let's talk about Adeptus Custodes. Adeptus Custodes, typical detachments you were going to see will be the Shield Host, Lions of the Emperor, and Solar Spearhead. Now, what are the strengths of this awesome army? Well, one thing is they have the coolest lore around, but let's move on to actual gameplay stuff. They have incredible melee damage. When it comes to actually just raw melee output, Custodes on average are going to be about as good as it gets. They are going to be the idea of martial excellence when it comes to melee. Every single thing in the entire army is effectively 5 attacks with sustained or lethal, strength 7, AP 2, damage 2. And that is not a bad profile to have on your basic freaking infantry. And in addition to that, they are also generally quite tough. Everything in the army is going to have approximately a 2-up armor save, 4-up invulnerable save. Now, some of the vehicles might have a 5-up invulnerable save, but that's the general profile you're going to see. They have a unit called the Wardens, which are a big problem because they have a once per game 4-up Feel No Pain, which can make them effectively immortal for an entire phase, which can really wreak havoc on certain armies that are only one-phase armies. I'm looking at like World Eaters and looking at things like our what do you call them? Tau, like Fish Boys. If they're only a one-phase army, that can be a really, really big problem. So, they also have an absolutely incredible anti-tank tank in the form of the Clades Gravity Tank. Now, I might hate this model, but the Custodes do rely on it to exist. It is going to be like 4 shots hitting on 2, strike 12, twin-linked, AP3 damage, D6 plus 2, which makes it extremely reliable. And it's tough. It's got a T11, a 2-up armor save, 5-up invulnerable save, and it moves pretty quick, especially since it's got like that fly keyword. So it is a amazing lane controller when you're trying to control your opponent's battle tanks. So they've got some really, really good strengths. Now, some of the big weaknesses that you get to exploit for Custodes, and the weaknesses are extremely weak. Basically, any unit in the game whose purpose is to counter anti-elites will smash the entire army. The worst thing for a Custode player is to see someone who has flat 3 damage. Whether that's going to be the new Grey Knights with flat 3 damage Paladins, whether that's going to be a Forge Fiend with flat 3 damage, whether it's going to be an Exocrine with flat 3 damage. Any of these platforms can just one-tap an entire unit. And when an entire unit dies for Custodes, it's not 100, 150 points. You're talking 250, 300-point units that just die due to the flat 3 damage shooting, which is brutal. So they're also highly, highly susceptible to dice spikes. Whether they spike high or spike low, it can dramatically affect the game. If a Custode player only rolls 4 invulnerable saves, there might not be much you can do to win the game. But if they don't roll the 4 invulnerable saves, they basically just automatically lose. Now, it's not really that clear cut. There's a lot of gameplay stuff that goes into it, but that is the common meme when it talks about Custode players, live and die by the 4-up. And there is some form of truth to it, but it's not like 100% true. But anyway, they also have very low model count and unit count army. As a matter of fact, if you kill a basic infantry unit for their army, that's almost 2% of their entire army just by losing 1 model. So Custodes really suffer bad from snowballing effects. So that's one of their big weaknesses. So in order to take advantage of this, look for your flat 3 anti-elite infantry style units. Perfect. Admeck. Jumped ahead of myself. Admeck. Adeptus Mechanicus. The main 3 detachments we're going to see for this are going to be the Rad Zone, the Skitarii Hunter, and the Halo Scree Data Clade. Now, Admeck, contrary to popular belief, actually do have some serious advantages in the game, and they have some really, really good strengths. But a lot of people just don't want to play Admeck the way Admeck has to be played. This is something that will affect people from a lot of different armies. Their army isn't designed to play the way they want their army to play, which is kind of what I was talking about at the beginning of the video, where I was saying, if you're playing an army but another army plays that style better, you might as well just go play that other army. And guys, remember, I'm talking about a competitive mindset here. This channel is only focused on competitive. I understand, but it's the army I have, so I got to play the army. I know that, man, but I'm here just giving competitive advice. So I don't need to fight in people in the comment section and be like, oh, this guy's a jerk saying you shouldn't play your army. It's the army I own. I'm not, man. I'm just talking about the competitive viability here. All right, so strengths for Admeck. They have insane OC. They've got some of the greatest OC shenanigans in the entire game. Their basic infantry will subtract OC from you, and it's not limited to 1. So if you have OC 1, you'll go to OC 0 when you're nearby them. And they don't even have to be engaged with you. They only have to be within 3 inches of you. They also have these incredible units called these Skitarii sterilizers, or Taraxi, whatever. Anyway, these Flappy Bird boys who can move like 26 inches in a turn and do a full army move block turn 1, which can be very, very powerful. So they've got some of the best move blocking in the entire game, bar none. Then they have a very, very solid Overwatch and extreme damage with one of their units called the Breachers, who can have, like, it's a unit of 6 guys that can have a 4-pin vulnerable save. They could walk through walls, and it could be like 4 times 6, what is that, like 24 shots that can have both sustain and lethal, or they could have lethal and critting on 5s with full rerolls to hit at strength 8, AP2, or AP3, ignoring cover potentially flat damage 3. It is one of the most hard-hitting units in the entire game, and they absolutely can one-tap a big knight, which is very, very rare. Then they have very fast-moving units, such as Ruststalkers, who can get out of a transport, go 11 inches, then advance and charge with +2 to the advance and +2 to the charge roll, and they'll have like 50 attacks that are devastating wounds and precision. So they actually have the ability to trade really well. They've got excellent mobility with shooting, seeing as they can give anything in their army assault and +1 ballistic skill, which is very, very top powerful. Now, they do have some extreme weaknesses, so it's not all roses and sunshine, right? They are extremely killable. Low armor saves, extremely low toughness, and they also don't have the ability to really one-tap units. Outside of the Breachers that I explained earlier, they really struggle to have one unit one-tap one of the enemy units. So it's all about, they're very reliant on coordinating all of their different resources to focus fire damage outside of the Breachers, like I just obviously. And the rest of the army also requires a large amount of coordination. In order to move as fast as some of the things I was just presenting you, you have to have your units strung out within certain distances of different battle line units. So they really do require a very, very skilled hand to pilot. But when that stuff comes together, man, you can see Admeck do amazing things. But I would definitely say they are not a beginner-friendly army. And if you don't like the way they play, you should probably just play a different army. Astra Militarum. Now, this is the Imperial Guard. People freaking love the Imperial Guard. Detachments you're going to see is Hammer of the Emperor, Combined Arms, and Recon. What are the strengths of this army? Well, they have extreme OC, very similar to the Admeck, but they don't really have abilities to decrease your OC, but they just have crazy cheap bodies with extremely high OC. They've got these extremely cheap throwaway units. They can throw away a 20-man OC bomb for 60 points, and they can just continuously do it. So they have really good move blocking potential, objective denial ability. They also have an extremely punishing gun line superiority, and what I mean by that is they can just drop 6 tanks, every tank of which is a 2-up armor save with T11, T10, T11, and they all have like 13 plus wounds. And they all shoot really, really hard. So they can have absolutely punishing, overwhelming firepower. And if you're in Combined Arms, you get lethal hits. If you're in Hammer of the Emperor, you can move through walls. Like, there's all sorts of things that they can do just to get mad gun line damage. Now, there are some weaknesses they have as well. They are very, very limited, or they have no fallback shoot and charge stuff. So most of the things in their army, especially like these tanks, they can't fall back and shoot and charge. So once they're tagged, and a lot of these tanks are highly reliant on blast weaponry. And remember, you can't shoot blast guns into combat. So this is a huge deal. If you can get through their cheap infantry and lock their tanks down just by touching them, that can be a death sentence to Astra Militarum. Now, that's easier said than done, because they're going to have these huge screens of cheap and throwaway units, like I said. So durable shooting, but they're extremely and like I said, their tanks are also very durable, but their chaff is very, 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 very killable. And as far as I know, they have 0 mortal wound protection. So armies that have a lot of mortal wound or dev wound output just can run through them. So that's the Astra Militarum. Let's talk about the Grey Knights. Now, Grey Knights are very, very new. I haven't had time to really dive into the new codex to get super, super expansive, but I'm going to hit the high points here for you right now. I believe the 2 detachments we're going to see the most is going to be Wartbane and Banishers, Wartbane being the Grotmus detachment. Now, what are the current strengths of Grey Knights? Well, they have exceptional mobility. Every single detachment can just uppy downy with deep strike 3 units every single turn. And that is extremely powerful. They can always be wherever they want to be, and it makes it very challenging for you to stage to get for your next turn, because they could just be in a place that you weren't expecting them to be. They also have very, very high damage output in melee against a variety of targets, because almost everything in their army will be minimum strength 6 AP2 damage too. Now, this is really good into elite infantry and chaff. It's not bad into things like transports, but it does give them a big weakness into big, tougher things like monsters and vehicles. Now, they have extremely high armor saves. Practically everything in the entire army has a 2-up armor save. And like I said, they're just extremely, extremely good at clearing through chaff or just basic infantry and your elite types units. Now, their weaknesses. Their army rule does not synergize well with holding objectives because uppy downy would happen in your opponent at the end of your opponent's turn. So if you do want to use their mobility, it can cost you on holding primary. And they have a very big weakness into monsters and vehicles. Monsters and vehicles. It can be very challenging for them to kill them, seeing as they are notoriously low to mid strength on all their weaponry. They don't really have access to any high strength weaponry. Let's talk about Imperial Agents real fast. And yeah, sorry guys. Basically, your army looks awesome, and you probably love Linkin Park, which means you've got the greatest taste in music in the world. So that's your strength playing Imperial Agents, and your weakness is your army is awful, and it's not a real army. And I kind of hate the fact that Games Workshop released this codex because they kind of just gave everyone hope that this was going to be an actual army, but it's not. It was a joke. I think Games Workshop should be kind of ashamed of this. Yeah, they should have just released it like as a Crusade exclusive thing because it's pretty disappointing. Sorry guys, Imperial Agents. It is what it is. Anyway, Imperial Knights. Let's talk about the Imperial Knights. This is by far the strongest army in the game right now, and hopefully they're about to get slapped down. That won't change what their strengths and their weaknesses are. It'll just make their strengths less strong and their weaknesses maybe a little more of a weakness. Now, the detachment you're going to see is the Noble Lance. Yes, they have the one Grotmus detachment, but no one's going to run it unless they're just doing it for fun. Here are the strengths. They have extremely, and that is a misspelled word, durable units. I did a video, I think last week, where I did the math on what it takes to actually kill one of these things. If you don't know exactly how durable they are, go check that video out. It's kind of intense just how much it takes to kill these guys. They've got extremely high OC. All of their big knights have OC 10 and their little knights have OC 6. They have extremely high damage output units. So they've got D6 plus 4 meltaguns that are ranged 18. They've got flat 3 damage in melee all over the place with high AP. Like we're talking about AP 3. They've got extreme speed. Everything's moving 10, 12 inches at a time. And all the big knights have towering, which means they have great ways to avoid line of sight blocking terrain because all they have to do is touch the terrain as opposed to being wholly within it to see through it. This gives them so much more flexibility in how they can stage. It basically effectively means that they will almost always get to strike first, which is a very, very big deal. The army gets to snowball to win. So, like, if one of their big knights just happens to live on a wound, oh my gosh, it can just snowball the game into an overwhelming victory for them. So they punish math skews very, very dramatically. It's a huge deal. And they also have exceptional reliability because they get to reroll 1 hit and 1 wound roll per every unit on the table. And that is crazy how much that can influence the damage output that they have. Not to mention they've got really strong strats. Like they got a 1 CP fight on death. So if you kill a big knight, they fight on death and they'll just kill whatever squad you attack them with. So it makes it very hard to trade into them. Now the weaknesses, they do have a very low model count army. As a matter of fact, some armies can just be straight up 6 models if it's just the bigs. And the army can also snowball to a loss when they lose models too soon. So that is a weakness of them as well. Unfortunately, they're just too cheap right now, so they just get too much on the table, so that does need to get nerfed, but that's okay. For right now, that is the Imperial Knights' strengths and weaknesses. So real quick, I'm just going to mention it. Space Marines, there's too many different types of Space Marines, so that's going to be a dedicated video to itself where I'm going to walk through the differences between Space Wolves, Black Templars, Dark Angels, Blood Angels, and I'll also do Vanilla Marines in there as well. And we'll talk about all of their strengths and weaknesses as well. This video has gone on long enough. These are the strengths and weaknesses of all of the Imperium factions. Let me know if you agree or disagree with anything that I said here. I'm actually really interested in hearing it. And until next time, everybody, crump on. Bye-bye.